Good morning, Magic. I'm Gavin Verhey from Wizards of the Coast, and I am also so excited because today I finally have in my hands the Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate Commander decks. These are really special to me because I worked on designing all four of these decks. In fact, I was the lead designer. While I worked on the main set and designed plenty of cool cards and have stories about that too, this is where I spent the bulk of my time, designing these four decks and all the new cards in them. So today what we're going to do is we're going to crack open all four of these decks. I'm going to tell a bunch of stories, probably about every single card, at least all the new cards, and go through the reprints, show you what's in here and what to expect. It's going to be a blast. It's probably going to predict now, probably going to be on the longer side because I have so much I want to say and I can't wait to share with you. Whenever a project I lead design comes out, it's always a really exciting moment. So let's crack into party time here and see exactly what's going on. So this is a white-black party deck. What happened was early on in the design process for the main set, we were trying out a party variant called Mega Party. That let you combine a bunch of different types to put in your deck. You could get bards in your party and all those other D&D classes. Well, it didn't really work out. But when I started working on the commander decks, I was like, you know what I want to do? We should put party in here, right? When we made the first set, Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, everyone expected we would do party, and we didn't. Well, how about we do it this time in the commander decks? One of the challenges with doing it in the draft set is getting all the creature types right and getting the balance on everything correct. Party is a really hard mechanic to make work in that respect. And in a commander deck, you could make a very clear balance between all your creature types. You know what people are going to open up every single time. So it's your party, and they'll die if you want to. Headed by Nalia D. Arni. So I'll get into it in a second. I'm not going to talk about exactly what is in a... I'll tear it from the front. White black right there. Exactly what is in here until we see it all. So let me pull this out. So here is the deck. Comes out like this. Oops. Knocked my camera there. You want a little ride with me. Here's the deck. Crack it open. Here's your spin down, or not your spin down, but your whirling down counter. Goes all the way from 20 on one side, well, I guess 21 to 40 on this side, and then 1 to 20 on this side. Super easy to use. You just hold it in your hand, twist it down. No problem. You've got this little insert. That's a spacer. Put that away. You've got this, though. This is kind of cool. This walks you through the story on one side of who Nalia is. So if you've played Baldur's Gate, you might recognize this character. Here's the deal with Nalia D. Arnis. I'm not going to read the whole thing out. You can freeze frame the video if you want to learn more. And then on the other side is information about playing the deck. Hey, I wrote this. This talks about what you want to do if you're playing this deck. Basically you want to be able to get a bunch of party stuff in play and hold some in your hand. That's very crucial. Hold some in your hand in case there's a board sweeper. I think a lot of people when they play this deck will kind of, just because they want to play out their cards, toss out all their creatures, and then there'll be a board sweeper, and you're like, uh-oh, I'm out of options. You often want to keep a little bit of party action in your hand for if the board gets cleared. So there's Nalia for you. And you can, once again, freeze frame this, and is that a phrase people use anymore? Freeze frame? Probably not. Freeze frame this and see what's going on there. One other thing you'll find here before we get into the deck is this Collector Booster Sample Pack. You'll find one of these in every single one of these commander decks, and this just gives you a little taste of the kind of things you can expect from a Collector Booster. So let's see what we get inside here. Get a couple goodies. We get... This is a add card. Ooh, we get an extended art, Gale's Redirection. That's pretty cool. And, a foil rulebook frame, Halcyon Emerald Archdruid. Very cool. It's a little bonus in every one of these commander decks. But let's get into the part that I actually designed, the commander deck itself. So, pull off this delightful plastic. Here's some crinkling noises. You can get your ASMR headphones out if you want to. On the very front of here, we've got Nalia. And this is notably the normal version of Nalia, but if you go to the back here, there's also the thick version of Nalia. Now, in case you haven't bought commander decks in a little while, we started including these thick versions of cards that are, you don't want to put these in your deck to actually shuffle, but they're just a bonus little component that, because your commander always lives off to the side, these can live off to the side. Little cool foil treatment on them there. Even have a different collector number. You see down here, this is 934. Okay, well, let's talk about Nalia. What's going on here? And then, of course, you still get the normal Nalia, by the way. Oops, still get the normal. Oh my gosh, what am I doing? I'm just too excited. You get the normal Nalia. It's not like I hang out with cards all day long. there's the normal Nalia too. Okay, so what's going on with Nalia here? Well, it's a 3-mana 3/3, and I worked for a very long time to try and figure out what the right reward for this deck was. I had a bunch of designs that got stuff back from your graveyard, because white and black can both pull small things back from your graveyard. I was trying that for a while, and the problem with that was it was kind of bad to play early because you didn't have enough in your graveyard yet. And it was actually, I was cranking on this, and Glenn Jones was the one that suggested, what about Future Sight for party types? And Future Sight is one of my favorite cards. It actually is my favorite card in Magic. And Future Sight lets you play with the top card of your library revealed, and then you can play it. So I thought, oh, that for party types is awesome. And then it's got this little bonus down here for a full party. One thing I love about this design is it's really can be played in a lot of different ways. You can play it in this deck as a party commander, right? You play it in your party deck, play all 4 types. And now we can get this last bonus. But also, if you want to have this be your cleric commander or your warrior commander, you can do that and Future Sight the top card of your library and try and cast a bunch of warriors that way. You won't get the full party bonus, but it's still pretty exciting as a 3-mana 3/3 that lets you Future Sight your class types. So that's pretty cool. And I'm excited to see what kind of decks people build with this one. As you know, a 3-mana 3/3 can come down early and recast for 5 on the first go around. So this one's pretty strong. The party deck needed plenty of strong stuff because you only really had one set's worth of material to work with from when it showed up in Zendikar Rising. So there's Nalia again, and there's 10 new cards in each of these decks. So I'm going to walk you through them. The backup commander, or a featured commander, as I suppose it's technically called, is Burakos, Party Leader. Now, one thing we did with these commander decks is we decided, hey, there are these backgrounds in the main set. Let's make every one of these commander decks have one background pair. So you choose a background card and one background to go along with it. This immediately locked all of our decks into being 2 colors because we didn't want you making 3 color combinations with the backgrounds. The reason for that is we found the strongest thing to do in Commander is add more colors into your deck. It's very subtle, but the more colors you get to play, the stronger your deck can become. So we've moved away from, for example, making 2 color partners for that reason. In Commander Legends 1, you only saw monocolored partners. Because you're getting 2 commanders, you shouldn't also get access to a bunch of colors because that's just so powerful. I think Thrasios is a gigantic mistake of a card, and part of it is because it also just gives you blue-green on top of this very powerful commander. So we knew we were going to do 2 colors. 2-color commanders, basically from the get-go here, and it's a matter of finding the one. So I'll show you these both at the same time because I think that they should be seen together. Here is Burakos and Folk Hero. So Folk Hero I actually came up with first. I was like, what would be cool is a background that cared about creature types, because that's a thing we're not doing a lot of in the main set. I was looking for things here that we could do that were a little different from the backgrounds you would find in the main set. What could we do in the commander deck? So I came up with this pretty quickly, and everyone loved it. It seemed like a perfect way to give white some card draw in a very white feeling way and care about creatures. Cool. So then I was like, well, if this is true, and we're going to have this background around, then whoever the other commander is going to want to have all the party types. And some people pushed back on that and thought, no, it could just have 1 or 2 and, it wouldn't be that big of a deal. But I really wanted it to be, if you play this deck out of the box and you decide to play with this commander instead of Nalia, you would not feel like you got, right? You're not suddenly like, oh, well, I don't draw cards off my rogues. What gives, And Burakos is all 5 creature types, or all 4 creature types plus Orc, I should say, the 4 party types. Additionally, it also makes your opponent lose life and gives you treasure when it attacks. So pretty fair for treasure generation, but one thing this deck wants is mana to be able to play cards to get its party going. So, 1 attack, 2 attacks from this, you'll get some extra treasure, deal some damage, and then create some stuff from your hand that you get to play some creatures, fill out your party, and so on. And of course, as you're drawing cards off Folk Hero, you'll have more things to spend mana on with Burakos. So it's a good kind of back and forth relationship here, as choose a background cards should be. So that's the design behind those cards. All right, there's some reprints in here too. Now this deck is a little lighter on mana rocks than others because it really wants to be playing creatures to the board. But of course, you've got Arcane Signet and Command Tower. Oldies but goodies. Lots of fun reprints. There's really fun for me. So in Commander deck design, on your team, there's a 4-person team, each person is in charge of one deck. Now, ultimately, I make the final calls on everything, and I go through kind of late in the process and make tweaks to people's decks and so on and so forth. But kind of there's, someone in charge of each of the decks for at least the beginning to mid part of the process. And I was actually the person in charge of the white-black party deck. So this one was really all me. And one of the fun things that I really enjoyed was looking through Magic cards to see, okay, what cards have these types that we can use, right? Once we decided we're going to do white-black, We talked about different colors. We talked about white-blue for a long time, and but that already has Lavinia as a possible commander, and white-black just made a lot of sense. Also, like I said earlier, white-black both get to resurrect small things from your graveyard, which was going to be really important, we thought, to get your party to stick and play. And there's a couple cards in this deck that definitely play into that. But anyway, Even Mind Sensor is a cool card in that it's just, it's been playing Commander for a long time. It's just this innocent little bird wizard that makes your opponents searching rough. One thing I like in particular is that the precons are really low on deck searching, so this is actually not that good in the precon biodome. There's some things it hits for sure, especially against the red-green deck. But and when you take this deck and play it out in the wild, there's a lot more tutoring, so you're really punishing people who play those mean old tutors. This card I thought was really charming as a removal spell for this deck because not only is it every creature type, which is, hits all your party types, but you can sometimes even target your own creature to hit a party type that you are desperately missing. So that makes me smile. Changelings, by the way, super glue for this deck. Really important. Now, every Changeling only counts for one party type, right? It doesn't count for all four. It doesn't turn everything on immediately. But it will fill in whatever type you're missing. So I leaned on Changelings a lot in this deck. Like this one, a regular cohort, not a card you would normally see in Commander, but it makes 2 cards of a party type, right? Or 2, token's not a card, I guess, but you get 2 party types filled out right away. So lots of Changelings here. This is also a card. We actually put this card into New Capenna to help kick back to the party archetype in case we could give it some final fuel before Zendikar Rising rotated out of Standard. It hasn't really hit in that way, but if it gives you a rogue and a wizard. So that's pretty cool. Mother of Runes, really nice cleric, classic one here. Priest of Ancient Lore. So here's Priest of Ancient Lore. It's D&D themed, so it fits in this world well. Cleric that draws you a card. I will say there's one thing in this deck that I'm sad about is Inspiring Overseer, the card from Streets of New Capenna, 3 mana, 2/1 flyer, ETB, draw a card, and gain 1 life, is also a cleric. And we're making all these sets at the same time. And I learned this too late to get into these decks. So I realized it. I scrambled back to see, hey, can we replace Priest of Ancient Lore with the flying version? I didn't get to it in time. So you'll have to be stuck with Priest of Ancient Lore. But on the flip side, it's D&D themed, so it does fit the flavor very well, at least. And hey, if you have an Inspiring Overseer, which you almost certainly do because it was bananas in draft and you probably drafted them, just put that in this deck. I did get this Rumor Gatherer in here, though. Once again, I was looking at that Inspiring Overseer, that cleric type just slipped by me, but Rumor Gatherer is here. There's this Changeling, which is really easy to get down for cheap. Double strikes. The Changelings, as I explained earlier, are really important for this deck. So yeah, Changeling Outcast, also secret MVP of this deck. Turn 1 Changeling Outcast, so powerful. You might think I'm joking. It's actually really relevant. It gets all your creature types rolling. A wizard. Who didn't think Corpse Augur was a wizard, but there you go. We tried to incorporate a bunch of the cards from Zendikar Rising with the party mechanic. Not all of them, but we did try them all out. This is a card that looks really innocuous. In fact, I got a lot of raised eyebrows when I was saying I was putting this in this Commander deck. And then people would see it in playtesting, and it was very strong. Because, once again, this deck can revive your creatures that are small. It's not uncommon for this to drain 8, 12 more life over the course of the game. This is a card that was really awesome. The fact that it gets you back to 2 creatures is a pretty big deal. So, once again, helps you revive your stuff. A rogue, wouldn't expect the rogue. Bazooka Port Cutthroat, a staple. Get some good removal spells in here. You get the Throne. There's the Origin of Signet. Skullclamp, really happy to get this reprint in here. This deck, the place it flops the most is there are some games where you play out your stuff, someone casts a board sweeper, and then you're out of stuff. Now, Naalia helps you rebuild, which is nice, but having a way to turn some of those extra creatures that you have in play into cards is really relevant, and Skullclamp really does a great job there. Soul Ring, of course, it's in every Commander deck, Talisman Hierarchy, a bunch of cool lands. Here's, by the way, in case you didn't notice, I think we debuted this with New Capenna, but Ash Barrens actually... this was Magic Online only art that we put into these Commander decks, so it's a little bonus art for you. And this actually came to be, believe it or not, funny story. Someone tweeted at me one day, like, hey, when are we going to see this art in printed in Magic? And I went from that tweet, was like, there's Magic Online exclusive Ash Barrens art, looked at it, was like, that's pretty sweet art, and then I just messaged people to see if we could get it into New Capenna, and that's how it came to be, which I thought was pretty cool. Bajuka Bog, deal with people's graveyards. Mortuary Mire, once again, getting your small stuff back, irrelevant. The deck's low on acceleration, because it's white-black, and you are playing stuff to the board early normally, but Myriad Landscape can help you accelerate a little bit. Orzhov Basilica, Path of Ancestry, really relevant too, because you've got a lot of rogues in your deck, so more that matches your type than normal. Snowfield Sinkhole. Now, this is a card you would probably not expect here. You're like, why is Snowfield Sinkhole in this commander deck? Well, I'll tell you why. It's because it is a plains swamp. So you can search for it with cards that search for basic plains. So as you're retooling this deck, maybe putting in Godless Shrine or something like that, that plains type is actually really relevant here. Wow, right next to this, I didn't think they'd be right next to each other, but there they are. The Deep Gnome Terramancer. This is a card I came up with, and just immediately everyone's like, yep, that looks like a card that will be amazing for White and Commander. And one of my goals with this deck was to give White some awesome tools for Commander, because we try to be pretty moderate for the most time with printing staples. We really don't want to be doing that business anymore for Commander. Just print cards that are cool that you will consider, but won't go in every deck, with the exception of not quite staples for White, but things that you will definitely consider for most White decks. And this is a card I think you will definitely consider for most White decks. My favorite little last touch here is removing the word basic. Arainie, who is unfortunately no longer at Wizards, but at the time her recommendation was to remove basic from before here, and I'm glad we did, because it let you find all kinds of cool stuff like that Snowfield Marsh, or I don't know, your Scrubland you got lying around or something. And this is a card that I'm really happy we got to print at 2 mana. There was a lot of talk about bumping it up to 3, but I held fast to keep it at 2, and we'll see how history treats me there. One other fun thing is the name for this card was originally very different. It's the same concept, but it was, I'm blanking on it. Someone in the comments can shout it out, but there are these deep gnomes. They're like fibula. They're like really long names. It was like impossible to spell. Someone in the comments will post it, I'm sure. I don't. I'm just not even gonna try to make it up. I don't remember what it was, but it was very long. It was like 9 or 10 letters or something, and very hard to pronounce. And I was like, look, this card's gonna be a White staple. We're gonna want to be able to reprint it in the future. Let's give it a name that is not impossible for people to say. And our creative was like, okay, sounds good, and they changed the name. So great work editing creative. Listen to that. Harper Recruiter. Once again, getting White cards in a very White way. This can draw you up to 4 cards if you hit all 4 of the types. Most of the time this deck you're like drawing 2 cards or so, which still for a 3 mana 3/1 flyer is pretty solid. It helps you get one of each type, which is pretty nice. This is a card I expect you'll be playing in all your party decks, but you might also just put this once again in your Warrior, Cleric, Rogue, or Wizard deck. Not that you're gonna be making a lot of like White Rogue decks aren't party decks, I guess, but it just helps you find what you need. Seasoned Dungeoneer. This card went through a lot of iteration, and to quote Adam Prozac, he called this during the slideshow when I showed off all the cards to everyone. This is your classic initiative, protection from everything, explore matter, or exploring creature. Just the classic combination of 3 wacky mechanics to put on a card. But it plays really well. It's important to get your creatures in there. This deck, one place it can also fall apart is if it gets stonewalled by your opponent's creatures. Now, the face commander, when you hit a full party, does give all your stuff death touch, but you still want to be able to keep getting through. And this is a card that can help you just keep punching through with a creature, because pro creatures means that they can't block it, which is really nice. Also, it all comes together as a flavorful, cohesive package, right? You take the initiative, you're in the dungeon, something gets protection from creatures and explores. I thought explore was a really resonant word. Early on, I basically knew I wanted to combine the initiative and explore on a card. And I didn't know what the rest was going to do. And I tried a lot of different packages. This creature originally was a 4 mana 3/3 that said whenever you ETB take the initiative, and whenever you move into a room of a dungeon, it gets a +1/+1 counter. But ultimately, this was just a way better design for the deck and way more exciting than that previous version. One they'll talk about is the initiative. So we talked earlier if we wanted to make an initiative or dungeon deck, right? If one of the decks should be all about the dungeon. And we decided that wasn't really going to work. There wasn't enough support for it, really. There's just one other set of adventure cards and initiative cards in the main set. And, having one deck that was really trying to control the initiative and take it all the time is actually going to be less fun than every deck having a little bit of initiative, because initiative, we thought, made games just play better. And having one person not, basically keep taking it over and over again was probably going to actually not help smooth out the game for the other players. So instead, I was like, okay, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to just put one new initiative card in all 4 of the decks. So this is the new initiative card in the White-Black party deck, and we'll get to the others as we get there. Stick Together. This is a design that I just jotted down and was like, yeah, that's exactly the kind of card we should make, right? Party Wrath. It's a great name. Really captures that moment of like, yeah, you all want to be together. The other fun, keep the party together. Don't split the party. Which I think is what the playtest name for this card was don't split the party. The funny thing we found with this card is you learn about a bunch of random creature types that creatures have, because you'll cast it and like as the party player you're like, okay, I'm gonna keep all 4 of my creatures, and then you look around the table and like Niv Mizzet's a wizard, learn from this card. So a lot of random things you learn from this. Black Market Connections. This is one of my favorite cards in the deck. Favorite new cards. I think the flavor on this is just awesome, right? You have connection to the black market. Every turn you get to go to the black market and buy whatever you'd like, but you have to buy something. So you will slowly tick down over time. This card was actually Justice Geddes, I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, but they were a conceptor on this set. And they also, at one point, they were like, hey, can I submit cards? And I was like, absolutely, if you have cool cards, send them my way. And so they sent me a document full of card designs, and this was one that I plucked and put right in the set. I'm like, this is awesome. I absolutely love what's going on here. I love the idea of an enchantment where there's 3 modes that you pick between, And the secret sauce they had was this 1 or more. And the modes changed a decent amount, I think the draw cards stayed the same. The rest moved around. But it was, I think this won our internal rare poll too. People really love this card, so I tried to keep it around. A couple of interesting things here. It triggers at pre-combat main phase instead of upkeep, because that way you get to make the decision after you have, 2 reasons. One, you get to make the decision after you've drawn your card, so you just have all the information for the turn, right? You don't have to speculate on, well, if I draw this, I might not want this, etc. You still draw a card off this, but so you don't have all the information if you choose the second mode, but you still have the majority of information for the turn. The second thing is it's awkward always when you draw your card for the turn, you forget about this, and you have to back up and be like, I guess I would have chosen this mode if I didn't know that information, right? And in Commander, you kind of let people back up and do that, but it's just way easier to execute if you draw your card for the turn, then you do this, instead of having to back up to before that you drew your card. One final thing I'll note here is I got a new token for the set, this 3/2 colorless shapeshifter with Changeling. I got a new token commission for this card originally just because I thought I was making a 2/2 colorless shapeshifter with Changeling. I thought it'd be cool to have a new token that looked like it was from this card. We'll see it back here in a little bit. But as things evolved, I found that I wanted to have a slightly larger token. Just the gameplay of 3/2 was a little better. Also, it made sense. You're paying 3 life, 3/2. It really felt right. So I bumped it up to 3/2, so you get a brand new Changeling token. This deck has 1/1 Changelings, 2/2 Changelings, and 3/2 Changelings. 3/3 was just a little more than we wanted to do on this card. Final thing is I'll say the last little secret sauce I added to this card was coming up with names for each of these. I worked with editing on that because I think it's cool to say, hey, I'm going to the black market, I'm going to sell contraband and hire a mercenary, or I'm going to buy information and hire a mercenary. Really, that moment, it puts you in the world of Baldur's Gate, in the world of Dungeons and Dragons. So I think that card's really sweet. Solemn Doom Guide. I really like the Unearth and Encore mechanics. I think it's fun to be able to play with your graveyard. And it was a really good fit for this deck because, like I said, your stuff will die, and this can bring all your dead stuff back, right? It can give you a temporary party for a turn. It can make a bunch of surprise attackers out of nowhere. It also just gets extra flying into the deck. This is a deck that is more on the ground than others, so a bunch of flyers are in here. The multi-class Baldric. Someone, I don't remember who, maybe it was Noah or Ken Nagel, other team members, had the idea of a party equipment. And I was like, I don't know what I want it to do, but I love the idea of a party equipment. So this went through so much iteration, but finally ended up here as a cool little party reward. A couple things I think are fun. One, it costs 1 mana to cast, which is really relevant for Trinket Mage. We talked a lot about if you should be able to Trinket Mage for this card. Ended up on yes, so maybe some people out there will be Trinket Maging. By the way, that's a wizard for multi-class Baldric in, Legacy or something like that. Probably not, but you never know. One thing that I think is really relevant on this card, just based on how we decided to template it, is that this bonus only works if you have if you've got a full party, if you actually have all 4 types. But this bonus just looks at creature types that you control. Why is that relevant? Well, a single Changeling turns on all of this card, right? Burricos turns on all of this card, which is quite powerful. So have one of those in play, and you get lifelink, death touch, haste, and flying. So that's pretty rad. One thing we worked on a lot with this card is an equipment that looks at your party types that grants stats is kind of weird because your party types might die in combat. For example, this for a little while was giving +X, where X was your party size, but there was this weird thing that would happen where you would attack, they would block, and then other party members would die, shrinking your creature. And then we had to be a triggered ability, but then it wasn't working on both players' turns. So we decided, hey, we'll take off the stat bonus and make it a much cheaper, much lower to the ground card. And it turned out really nice, I think. But then we have a bunch of reprints. We've got Archpriest of Iona, just a nice party card. We try to find the good party reprints where possible. Also try to find the red sweepers where possible. We wanted to find ones that would let you keep some of your stuff in play. A lot of your stuff is smaller and lower than 3, so a sheer command can wipe things out and keep that in play. Finding cool creature types on some of these reprints. Bygone Bishop is a cleric that also lets you investigate. Dusk to Dawn, perfect. A lot of your stuff is going to be small and can bring back a lot of your small creatures. Just keep rebuying them. Did you know this was a cleric? How about this? You know this was a cleric? Learned about so many things. Did you know this was a wizard? You're going to keep hearing that over and over. Just a lot of things that we learned about there. This is a great game ender. The Maguses are all wizards, so you can use this card here. Another card I made in an old commander deck was that Magus. Mirror Entity, Rockstar. Activate this ability and you will have a full party, right? Because it makes, everyone always knows about, Mirror Entity makes everything an XX. But they might sleep on the fact that it gains all creature types. So activate Mirror Entity for any amount, and if you have 4 creatures, you will have a full party. So that's pretty relevant. This is a big reprint for this deck that was awesome. Because it just gets back your small stuff. Really relevant to be able to rebuy your party types and get back some of your ETB triggers. Really happy you got this reprint in here as a cleric. It made a lot of sense. And first of all, people just wanted to own this card. A lot of folks out there want more Selfless Spirits. But also, saving all your stuff from board sweepers is really important. So having this on the table is nice. But also it's commander. It's a lot easier to interact with. You can have one player maybe ping it off, and then someone else board sweeps you. So it creates pretty good gameplay. Another card that's just a total banger. It gets back your small stuff, like I said, white and black's color pie to do that. This is a really powerful party card. You'll pretty often be able to get 4 tokens out of this and then make all your stuff big and indestructible. So these cards are really strong. This guy keeps coming back. You haven't really seen party at its full force in Commander before because it was a little on the weak side in Zendikar Rising, but I think with this it brings a lot back. This is a card I was really glad to find. This was I believe a Game Night card from the Game Night box set. Kind of random, one of the 5 exclusive cards there, but it was a wizard and actually helps give you a lot of reach in the long game because you just attack someone, they take a bunch of damage, and even before they block, which can kill them outright. So happy to get that reprint in here. This is a card that is huge, actually. Once again, a card that maybe you never even thought about or seen, but in this deck, which is a little more on the aggressive side, atypically so for a commander deck, having everyone lose a third of their life is huge for you. And this is actually a card that's just correlated to a pretty high victory count with this deck because people end up at low life totals and you can take them out. Gonti's a rogue, you know that one? Great reprint from the last Adventures in the Forgotten Realms decks. I was working on these decks before AFR came out. So I kind of had to just take stabs in the dark at some of the AFR reprints. And I was like, I really want to use this one if I can because it's a rogue and it's from the last D&D set. I'm glad we got that in here. This makes a warrior and keeps a warrior around, so that's pretty nice. This is a card I made back in Battle Bond, and it's living here. I think this is kind of cool in that it's warrior type matters, but it's also warrior itself. So even though it's not really full on party, I let it slide, and it's pretty easy to draw cards with this. Pretty strong card for this deck. Great way to kill people in the air. Once again, cleric, you know that. This wizard steals all kinds of stuff. Here's a card that I grabbed from the new Strixhaven decks, or I guess they're not that new anymore. They're still new in my head. Just think about playing Magic for 20 years. It's not from Invasion. It's not from before Invasion. It's new. Anyway, really happy to get this in here. It's a wizard. Who would have guessed that? That also gives you a board presence as stuff does. Inklings, no creature type on those, but still. And it looks at all your counters, which of course are given out by Nalia. So they actually pair pretty well together, right? If Nalia gives your party a bunch of counters, your creatures a bunch of counters, then this will help you get a bunch of tokens if you're out to your board. This was a great late catch where I was like, oh, there's a saga that makes a warrior. I didn't catch this one right away, but I found it late in deck building. I was like, oh, it's a really good fit. And there's even a couple angels in this deck you can use it with, which is 2. But it's also just a 4 mana, 4/4 flying angel that gives you extra bonuses. So like pretty happy with that. Cool cleric. A great one to keep reviving back over and over again. Of course, Maskwood Nexus. 4 mana. In fact, I got some criticism from some other designers that this actually made this deck too easy because some of the games you just draw Maskwood Nexus and then it's like, nope, nothing matters anymore. all your party is always on. But, you don't draw it every game. And I think everyone was on board with this one by the end. Great reprint to have here, too. Going to the mana base now, you got Castle Lothwin, get that card draw. This is a card I really need to include Mutavault in this deck. It is a key card for the party archetype. It's just so crucial to have 1 mana, get whatever party type you want. So, yeah, it's pretty huge deal to have that here. This also helps make sure you can attack late. War Room as well. You want to make sure there was card draw in the in your mana base. So Windbrisk Heist also gets you a card you can cast. Fun, by the way, you can attack with 3 party types. They think they're in the clear, and then Windbrisk Heist can play the 4th one out of nowhere, so keep that in mind. Haven't seen this reprinted in the new frame, I think, ever, which I was really excited about. There's enough clerics in here that you can actually really do a lot of damage with this last ability, so it's a great way to kind of finish out games. And you get your basic lands from the main set, a bunch of plains, find those, a bunch of swamps, find those, and then we get into our tokens. So we've got, of course, the initiative and the dungeon here. We got this cute little 1/1, still love this little shapeshiftery boy, and this clue token. Here are the brand new 3/2 shapeshifters, which come from the Underworld Connections. And you'll note in the artwork, it's like they're all the different D&D classes, right? So it's like, yeah, what do you need me to be? You need me to be a rogue, warrior, wizard, cleric? Well, I'll take care of it. Don't worry about that, which I thought was a pretty cool flavoring of these shapeshifters. I guess I'll go through them all on one side, and then I'll flip them over. It's going to be easier. Here's the core warriors. And we choose how many tokens are in here very carefully. So you'll note that card can make up to 4 core warriors. So that's why there are 4 core warriors here, because I didn't want you to just feel like there are only 3, and like you're like, oh, well, where's the 4th one? No, here's the 4th one. It's right there. 2/1 warrior from the Mardu card. There's a little reminder card at the back here about what formats are. Taking a look at the other side, we got our Inkling tokens for Felisa. We got treasure. We got this wizard, this mage's attendant wizard. Angel warrior from the Kaldheim saga. The normal 2/2 shapeshifter for the 4 mana 2/2 that makes a 2/2. And then another kind of shapeshifter. We have these ones too. The blue shapeshifters, not to be forgotten, from Maskwood Nexus. So yeah, lots of shapeshifters in this deck. Like I said, Changelings make this deck's world go round. So that is the white-black party deck, which I am now just slaughtering, trying to grab it all. Once again, I think I'd never handled a card in my life. But that was so cool to look through that and see it in person. Like so many hours were spent on this deck for me trying to get the creature type balance just right and designing the cards. I mean, the amount of work that goes into each commander deck, especially a 4-deck product where you've got a biodome you want to be able to play against each other is tremendous. And I am so glad to finally have this now. All right, well let's move on to our next deck. I'm gonna look at the Mind Flayers deck next, which has this guy, Captain Negatron, as the face. Here's the background. It is a horror tribal deck. All about the horror creature type, which is something kind of new and unusual for us to tackle. It is not a pirate deck, and I love the name Mind Flayers. When it was pitched, I was like, oh, that makes me smile. I will say that I've definitely gotten feedback that the name misled a few people to thinking it would be a pirate deck. So a good note for future decks. Let's make sure that even if the name is funny, we don't accidentally. By the way, I didn't pull this out earlier. I probably should have. But this is you get one of these for all the decks, as well as some little punch out counters you can use for +1/+1 counters, or as it always says on here, as victory confetti. So that's in every box too. It's not like the party deck is seriously missing it. So let's crack this guy open. Captain Negatron hanging on the outside, of course. Captain Negatron's a fun character. He's like a ship that goes between worlds or something like that. He's from like a Spelljammery world. I'm not sure, but we found this like Mind Flayer pirate, and we were like, oh, this character's awesome. We want to use him. And then at some point, creator was like, I don't think we want to use Captain Negatron. And I was like, okay, fine. Like I trust your opinion, whatever. And then they did a bunch of research to try and find a better option. And they actually came back to us and were like, nope, we're going with Captain Negatron. And I was like, yeah, awesome. You'd love to see it. So I'm really happy about that. Here's the little insert here. Look, by the way, we do something you don't see. We commission what's called packaging art for these characters in addition to their card art. So here's Captain Negatron's card art. I'll tell you more about him in a second. But you also get another version of their art that shows up on like the insert and on the packaging. That's the packaging art. Here's how you want to play this deck. The biggest thing, you can once again freeze frame and read it, but the biggest thing about this deck, I would say, is your main commander will mill, and you have several cards that will mill your opponent, but it's not a mill deck and that you're going to try and mill them out to 0 cards. You're going to try and mill them a little bit and then use their own stuff against them. Here, we can learn about Captain Negatron together. Tells you what's up with this guy. Yeah, this is the ship, the Scavenger, who I sadly did not end up making a card for, but I did think about it. Scavenger, Spell Jamming Vessel. So it is Spell Jammer. I do remember it correctly. That's good. It's been so long since I worked on these that I had forgotten if I remember that right. But here he is, Captain Negatron, all his glory. We can read that later. Let's just see what we get in here. Let's take a little peek at these collector booster sample packs. Just a little taste of a collector booster. Cool. Always cool to see what's inside. We get a foil extended art monster manual. That's gas. This card has gotten people very excited. Wow, that's rad. Man, imagine cracking open I know I sound like a total salesperson here, but I mean, I just seriously thought to myself, right? Just crack open your commander deck and get this as a bonus. If this was the red-green deck, I would just slot this right in. And then this fire diamond here. That rulebook frame. Really cool. Well, anyway, there's that. I just legitimately get excited about Magic cards. I know you're like, Gavin's works for Wizards. He's just some sales dude trying to get us to buy Magic cards. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, I guess technically that is true to some degree. But I just get excited about opening up Magic cards. I love talking about the designs with you. Oops, knocked my camera again. That's the fun thing you get on this show. Okay, let's check out what's going on here. So we've got, of course, Captain Negatron, and then the thick commander. I don't know why I always say it that way, but the thick commander here. Here's what's going on with Captain Negatron. So it's a 5 mana 3/6, so it's got a lot of toughness. It's good at holding down the fort. Gives all your horrors menace. Whenever a horror you control deals combat damage to a player, they mill that many cards. And then at the beginning of your end step, you get to pick an artifact or creature that was milled this turn, basically put in their library from the graveyard this turn, or the other way, put in the graveyard from their library this turn, and you get to get it into play. There were a decent amount of iteration. All the face commanders always go through a lot of changes, but the horrors you control of Menace line we liked really early on because you want your horrors to get through. And Menace also just fits. It's a great flavorful line of text, right? All your horrors have Menace. And then we kind of worked on a lot of different mill-based things. It used to be like an attack trigger to mill, but it was kind of problematic because you would attack, that people would mill a bunch of cards, and it was a big distraction from combat. Like attack, everyone does an operation, then resolve combat. It's just a lot of extra steps and time it takes in the game. So it was a lot easier to do once you hit them. And also really tied back to that Menace really nice, right? It makes the Saboteur matter more. This last ability originally let you grab any permanent out of their graveyard, and it was just way too strong at sealing enchantments. That was like the best thing to take. And just I scaled it back to creature, just creatures, and then I late in the process was like, oh, artifact makes sense. It's a pirate. Let's go with artifact or creature. It also originally made them horrors too, but there just wasn't text space on the card to make that work, which I think is ultimately fine. Like the other thing people brought up is if Captain Negatron makes creatures that it steals horrors, then it actually tells you don't have to put many horrors in your deck because this will itself make an army of horrors for you. So actually by removing that, it tells you to put horrors in your deck so you can do it more often, which I thought was interesting. This card can get in there itself, but mostly I like using this as a blocker while my other horrors do my dirty work. Why a horror themed deck? Well, I talked about the party deck earlier, why we did that one. Why we did a horror themed deck here is because we were looking down creature types to do. We thought would be cool to do as like a D&D creature type themed deck. And like beholders, for example, are their own type. There's only a few beholders to work with, but there's a lot of horrors in Magic. There's so many in Magic. And we thought, okay, well, Mind Flayers are awesome in D&D, and they're typed horror. Well, what if we put those things together? And it really made a lot of sense because Baldur's Gate 3, if you play through the little bit that exists so far that's public, there's a big Mind Flayer component to the game. And we thought, oh, well, we don't know when Baldur's Gate 3 is going to come out for sure, but lining it up with the new Baldur's Gate game would make a lot of sense. So we went down the horror path, and it's really fun, especially because we got to make a bunch of a reprint, a bunch of cards that like kind of would never hang out together, right? There's a deck of cards in this deck you will see that are pretty like wacky horrors to be sitting next to each other, but in this deck they just they really make a lot of sense. So that's pretty cool because they're all united under the horror banner. So let's take a look at this. I talked about the captain a lot. Let's take a look at the backup commander here, the featured commander, Zelix and Haunted One. So I was like, okay, this is gonna be your stealing stuff, mill commander, not go super wide on horrors. So I was like, okay, the backup commander then should be all about going wide on horrors, which is exactly what this does, right? It creates a ton of different horror tokens for you to then get a bunch of tribal bonuses and beat down your opponent with. So it itself, of course, mills people a little bit with this ability, and then as people mill creatures, you get to make tokens. It's really good with like Altar of the Brood or Mesmeric Orb, really good cards with this. And it's paired with Haunted One, which one thing I was looking at doing was the main set it wasn't bringing back old mechanics to use, or besides the few that are throughout the whole set. But in the commander decks, we can use whatever mechanics we want. So with Haunted One, I thought, well, was there something that makes sense for a horror deck? And I came upon Undying, which with any creature type deck, you want to make sure your stuff sticks around. I talked about that with the party deck a bunch earlier. And so this is no exception. So giving yourself Undying, really relevant. Two fun things here. I thought it was cool that it pumped up all your tokens, but it didn't. Undying on tokens doesn't bring them back. So that way, it wasn't like Zelix builds an army that's unkillable, but it does help you once again play other horrors in your deck to really make you want to care about it. By the way, I think Haunted One is going to be playable in like also just elf decks or whatever. It's good in a lot of black creature type matters decks. The other thing though is it triggers whenever the creature becomes tapped. So you can wait until another player's turn to use Zelix. So it's a pretty good combination here. Of course, normally attacking is how it's going to become tapped, but if yours has an activated ability like Zelix, it's a good combination together. So the other fun thing you can do is if you somehow, if they're using this as their commander, Hell One with a one that doesn't have a tap ability, you can give it Vigilance to turn it off, which I always thought was pretty hilarious. Okay, so here's some Mana Rocks, Mind Stone, Arcane Signet, Command Tower. Yeah, main set reprints. Factor Fiction. One thing that we enjoyed was in the blue-black deck, because it's kind of like evil-ish, is Evil Feeling, is making your opponent make choices. So that's where this came from. This is a card, talk about a throwback reprint, Dothy Horror, but not being able to be blocked is a great way to make sure that you can keep hitting and triggering Captain Negatron. And this creature is definitely not getting blocked. It's got Shadow, which almost nothing in the entire product does, or maybe nothing else in the entire product does. And it can't be blocked by white creatures, so like it's just definitely getting in there. Yeah, here's a relatively new card, the Dusk Mangler from Capenna. Snuck that one in there as a cool new horror. Feed the Swarm, get removal spell. Blue-black don't have a lot of way to deal with enchantments. So a lot of cards which are formerly Phyrexians, now Phyrexians, were originally typed as horrors. So those are still horrors now. And in fact, there was a big debate when we were doing the Phyrexian creature type update of if we should remove horror from those creatures. And I was definitely one of the voices who was like, I actually need these for my commander deck. So if you could not eliminate a bunch of horrors from the game, that'd be great. This card, by the way, Plague Spitter. Once again, you get this like totally wacky ragtag group of horrors that would normally not be hanging out together, right? But it's just like, when else are you going to see like Dothy Horror, Dusk Mangler, and Plague Spitter all together? But they ended up making a really coherent deck. This is a card which was big in Invasion Block Constructed, and a lot of people probably don't even know exists, with this very strange artwork by Chippy. But actually works out pretty well in this deck. It's very mean, in fact, against the party deck. Because it pings them stuff for one every turn. There's a lot of 1 toughness creatures there. So relevant in the Biodome. Big horror right here. Chupacabra. Steal people's stuff from their hand. They discard a card and you draw a card for each one discarded this way. Getting stuff into their graveyard is relevant because you have a lot of ways to play with your opponent's graveyard. So you want to get stuff in so then it powers stuff like Drown the Lock. Here's a card I made in Conspiracy 1. Extract from Darkness. I love when I design old cards that then help me out in the future. I'm like, past Gavin, you were so smart. I figured out this was a horror, and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. A cool thing to put here. I was happy to stumble upon this for a Mana Rock for this deck. Can't be blocked horror is like exactly what this deck wants. So Mana Rocks, lots of Mana Rocks. This deck has a high curve, so you want a Mana Rock up early. Herald's Horn, nice reprint. Lightning Greaves. This is really important for your commander, so if the board gets swept, you can play your commander, Greaves it up, and then attack and mill him right away and get something back. So that's why Greaves ended up in this deck. Mind Crank, one of the design constraint we had to figure out was, I was like, okay, if I'm going to put Mind Crank in this deck, that's cool. Everyone's going to want it. Make sure the commander does not go infinite with Mind Crank. So I had to make sure that would never happen. Tried a lot of commander versions that did. Whoops. Talismans, Thought Vessels, Mana Base again, Ash Barrens, lots of cool stuff. Port of Carfell, nice new, relatively new card from Kaldheim there. Okay, let's talk about some of these new cards. Here's Aboleth Spawn. So one of the things early on that happened was I asked Mike Merles for ideas for various horrors we could do that were not just Mind Flayers, that were other kinds of cool D&D horrors. And he gave me a list. You'll see a bunch of them here. And Aboleth Spawn is one of them. And Aboleth is like this underwater mind flayery kind of creature. It messes with your mind from afar. They're very powerful. This is a tiny one. This is a little baby Aboleth. Originally, this card actually stole their trigger abilities. 3 mana, 2/3 flash that whenever their ability would trigger, it triggered for you instead. It was an if instead of a whenever, and it stole it. But after seeing how Hull Breacher played out, I didn't make Hull Breacher, but still after seeing that, I was like, we should be really gun shy about this. I got enough feedback about that I was like, let's make it more sharing. Sharing is caring, right? So you do it, and I'll do it too. So you still get your thing, and I get my version of the thing. You can even do a bit of politics with people, teaming up. Hey, play your trigger ability thing, and I won't have your Chupacabra ability target you or what have you. So I think this is a much more fun version of the kind of stealing effect thing of like, oh, we'll both share it. There's some debate over if this effect could be white as well. We ended up settling with it in blue here, but you could maybe see a white version of this in the future. Obviously, this deck isn't white, so it wasn't really an option. I love this card. I think, first of all, it's just very underrated as a way to keep making 1/1 tokens. Like, if you just ignore this last line of text, for 3 mana, you just get a 1/1 copy of that creature every turn, so put it on your Mull Drifter or whatever. And then also, this last line to me is really cool because it tells you can play this in any deck, but in a horror deck, it's especially good. And it's also something where if your first of all, if your commander is a horror, it's a great fit. But also, if your deck isn't 100% horrors, if it just has 8 or 10 of them, maybe this is still a great include for you, and it might nudge you toward playing a few more in your deck. So I think I like cards that aren't all or nothing. Whenever I'm designing creature type matters decks, I'm looking for cards that you want to put in or that you want to take and put in other decks. This is a card that you might just put in some other deck, and maybe it gets a few more horrors because of that. Really happy with that design I came up with. This card is fun. Grell Philosopher. It gives all of your horrors all of the activated abilities of your opponent's artifacts. By the way, if you're ever playing against this card, do not, whatever you do, I repeat, do not play a Staff of Domination. You will probably lose the game because they'll probably go infinite with their horrors. Pretty cool card. I think this definitely has the potential to show up a lot, once again, outside of horror decks, because just stealing your opponent's activated abilities on their artifacts for on this one creature is already pretty good. And if you give it to all of your horrors, that's even cooler. One thing I want to call out, though, is this art here, though. Check it out. A lot of cool artifacts showing up here, including, what's that right here? Oh, a Soul Ring. That is, 3 mana, 1/4 that taps for 2 mana. Is probably going to happen a lot of the time, given there's going to be a Soul Ring in play. So happy we got that little Easter egg in there. Psionic Ritual. This used to copy in a lot of different ways. I don't remember exactly how it copied, and I couldn't figure out a version of this card that I was happy with. I think it had maybe a kicker or something like that, a multi-kicker maybe. And then someone, Glenn Jones or Chris Mooney or somebody suggested Replicate, tap an untapped horror. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's a great fit for this card. And it really made this card memorable. It's the first ever non-mana Replicate cost. I think maybe a Horizon set beat us to it. By the way, speaking of people, this deck was, I led the party deck. Ken Nagel led this deck. So Ken Nagel, of course, loves big creatures, big splashy Timmy-Tammy spells. So this is, you'll find plenty of those in here. So, and speaking of, here's the Brain Stealer Dragon. This card has kind of a funny story behind it. So I was thinking, okay, what would be a cool thing to have in the Mind Flayer deck? Have we ever done in D&D history a Dragon Mind Flayer? Right, that would just be so rad. So I went to Mike Merles and I was like, hey Mike, have we ever done a Dragon Mind Flayer? And he's like, oh, well, of course, if you read Dragon Magazine released in 2003, you would know that we talked about a Brain Stealer Dragon once. And I was like, that's a deep cut. I love it. Sign me up. And that's where this came from. I wanted to make a little bit of Steal Your Stuff Matters. We don't do a lot of stealing your opponent's stuff from the battlefield in Commander on new cards. It's generally not that fun. But I like the idea of stealing from your opponent's graveyard, which this deck does in spades. And then also stealing from their library. And this is a card that, steals from everyone's library, or all your opponent's libraries, which is nice. But then it also has this mean text where when you take their stuff, it deals damage to them. So I think if you want to play this with a bunch of ways to steal your opponent's cards, you cast this with Rise of the Dark Realms, or cast Rise of the Dark Realms with this in play, you'll probably just win the game on the spot. Not that Rise of the Dark Realms wasn't already going to win you the game, but hey, there you go. From the Catacombs, this is a card that very early on, I knew, so I wanted to do an initiative card in this deck, and I was looking for fun mechanics to pair with initiative, and we saw Explore and Initiative in the last one, which made a lot of sense to me. Another one that I loved was Escape and Initiative, and I spent a long time trying to figure out how to make an Escape initiative card work, because it made so much sense. You could escape the dungeon. So originally, this card was very wacky. It had you exit the dungeon, because you get it, you're escaping. So it like ran you backwards in the dungeon, or like you exited the dungeon and you got you got some bonus for like every room that you left. But that, of course, was weird in the rules and like wasn't really actually that appealing. So I tried a lot of things out and eventually settled with, okay, let's go with something straightforward and simple. Steal from a graveyard. The thing's bursting out of the graveyard. It's going through the catacombs, and it gives you the initiative. And I think that flavor is nice. And this is actually a card that I've seen people eyeing for a cube, maybe. I think it's pretty fun. We decided to put this corpse counter thing on there where it gets exiled afterward, because we didn't want you just targeting the same creature over and over. It was more fun to keep choosing different creatures. So that's kind of why that's going on there. Oh, Uchalan. This was a card on this list of weird horrors that Mike Merles really liked that I tried to get in here, and I'm so glad I did. It originally did not count oozes or crabs. It just counted horrors. But then once I saw it come back, and I saw how charming this card was, it just keeps replicating itself, which I think is pretty cool. Someone, maybe on the rare pool, suggested that we have it care about oozes too. And then in the final slideshow review of the set, someone suggested we have it care about crabs, because I saw it was on the type line for the card. I hadn't seen it as a crab ooze horror before. And I was like, sign me up. Sounds awesome. I love it. So, sometimes it's in that final review where you see the card art and the creature types and everything all together. You come up with an idea, and you're like, that was great. Crab ooze horror. And of course, a lot of people I've seen online very excited about building that crab deck. Maybe someday we'll make a commander for you, crab people. Good old reprint, Chasm Skulker. The squids are not horrors, but still, it's a pretty good size horror. It's a nice one. This was a card we found that was pretty huge, right? Because you can just cycle this for 2 mana, make all your opponents mill 4 cards, and really helps you find something good for Captain Negatron. Reprint of a card we saw back in AFR. This is a card I'm really happy to get here. Normally, like, we try and not reprint cards from new sets too much, but I pushed for this one because I was like, well, this is going to be I think it's going to be a pretty powerful card, and we need all the horrors that are awesome that we can get. And, even though this card is pretty new just from Midnight Hunt, or I think it was the set afterward, Crimson Vow, we're going to need it. So we got this one in the Sludge Monster too. This is a card that originally was actually in the blue-red deck, but it made a lot more sense here, just from a sense of feeling. This deck wants to play a long game and not get attacked, and having all your stuff flash is a great way to not do that. It really wants to like create that also sense of dread as a horror deck. So I had this in blue-red for a while, ended up flopping it into this blue-black horror deck, which I'm happy about. Mind Flayer, the creature itself, Overcharged Amalgam, another card that's recent. Pull from Tomorrow. This is a great grab for this deck. You get to duplicate all your horrors, which is quite nice, especially with the ETB ones. There's the aforementioned Sludge Monster. This guy, by the way, what a house. This card was very strong. It's a cheap horror that pretty easy to get through. In playtest, it was usually pretty good. Black Market, great reprint here on Crippling Fear. We saw this in Kaldheim. Glad to get this one back. Once again, a sweeper that keeps your stuff around, which is what we were really looking for. And this in the party deck, a good removal spell. This deck often plays a controlling game, so there's a lot of ways to blow stuff up. Dark Hatchling. Here's a card that was kind of funny story on this one. So Ken Nagel put it in, and we were like, I don't know about this Dross Harvester thing. It looks like it's going to be kind of on the weak side. But then, as we were playing, like, this card is actually just really good. Like, every time, it just gained so much life. So I think some people might even start putting this in other commander decks. So I don't know, it's something you might want to consider if you never have. But yeah, it's especially good in this deck. And there is, of course, a white deck in the Precon Biodome, the white-black deck. So Guilt Feeder. One thing I was excited about was getting new artwork for some old horrors that would put them as Mind Flayers or more D&D style horrors to help make it feel more like a Mind Flayer deck. And Guilt Feeder, although the previous art by Mark Zug, I think if I remember correctly, was a cool piece, or Mark Tadine. By a Mark. Anyway, I thought it'd be cool to reface this one for this deck. So it's brand new D&D artwork for this Guilt Feeder here. And it cares about the graveyard, which is nice. Hex, once again, a removal spell that only kills off your opponent's stuff and not your own, which is exactly what this deck wants. Hunted Horror, happy to make this card. This is a card that a lot of folks wanted reprinted, and that finally makes this token exist. I don't think it existed before. And it gives one player 2 centaurs, but then you can still attack whoever else. So maybe just jam this turn 2, give someone 2 3/3s, and then your best buds, and you start beating down on your opponents. I think this is another one of those cards that the games where you draw Hunted Horror are very different than the games where you don't, because you play this on turn 2 and just start attacking people, and you can get out of hand pretty quickly. And then everyone else is trying to team up to deal with you and making deals. This is a great horror to have around the counts your graveyard. This is a card I've always loved from Future Sight, the Nihilith. That it's also got Fear, so really hard to block. It's another one of those new art cards, Sewer Nemesis, originally a commander card. This is another new art card, Consuming Aberration, which is a huge card for this deck. Exactly what you want. Mills your opponents for a bunch very easily, and then it's just an infinite, essentially. Place stuff out of their graveyard again. This is a card I was happy to reprint here. You're often not going to know exactly what to name on turn 2, but you can always name one of their commanders if it's got activated ability. And then later in the game, maybe there's something sticking around you want to hit. And it does shut down mana abilities, so you can name their mana rock too. Be wary of that. Love seeing all these new Phyrexian types on here, by the way. It's cool to get it, spells get printed with it, and so on and so forth. Then you get your mana base, Grouping Tar Pit, this was very sad to me to find out this was not a horror and that it was an elemental. I really wanted it to be a horror, but still, unblockability, pretty important for this deck. You milled through this Drown Yard Temple, bring it back. Milled them a little bit with Nephalia Drown Yard, pretty relevant. Temple of False God, which is an amazing magic card. Don't at me. I love Temple of False God. It's especially good in this deck where you want to jam up to late stuff. There's a great article by Tomer where he was originally against Tomer I'm going to mispronounce his name, especially without it in front of me. Tomer Abermochi. He works on MTG Goldfish. Anyway, doing Commander Clash. And he was originally not about Temple of False God, and then ran the numbers and looked into it and found it was good in a lot of decks. So go read that article if you disagree with my inclusion of Temple of False God in some of these. Here's our tokens. We got some Squiddy Boys for Chasm Skulker. We got some horrors for Zelix. There's that brand new horror token. Ooh, scary. And then on the other side here, we've got the 3/2 Eldrazi horrors. The Centaurs. Here's your 2 Protection for Black Centaurs. Finally in existence for all you fans of that Hunted Horror. Copy token. And that's what you got here. Not as many tokens, mostly just 1/1 horrors that you're going to want for that Zelix. Why is it that I cannot pick all these cards up like a normal person today? All right. I'm going to set this deck aside and move on to the next deck. Which deck should I do next? I think we'll do the blue-red deck next. So, that's funny. The order I'm choosing to do them in is just the order that I had them listed in when I was designing the decks. So I put this on document so many times. I was like, yeah, it goes white-black, party, blue-black, horrors, blue-red, dragons, and then red-green, exile cast. I don't know why I did it that way, just what I did. Time for a Flight of Fury. So we talked early on about doing a dragon deck, and that didn't really pan out. We're like, we don't really want to do like a heavy dragon deck again. We did that a little bit with the last D&D set in red green. And Noah Milrod led this deck. And so we talked about a blue-red Goad deck, which we thought would be really cool, a really cool twist. Something kind of new. Goad was showing up a lot in the main set. So we're like, we can do a Goad deck. And then Noah Milrod, who's leading this deck, really pushed for it, and I'm so glad he did, this idea of a commander that would care about creatures that attacked this turn. I guess I'll just talk about it more when I get to the actual Furkrog card in the deck. Cares about things that have attacked this turn, not necessarily goading. It does trigger off of Goad, but it cares about things that have attacked. So you can also play it with red cards that have to attack every turn if able, and it'll draw you cards off of that. I'll show you this card right now because I'm talking about it. But so it triggers off all your red must attack cards, triggers off of blue forcing people to attack, so all those kind of cards. So there's a lot that Furkrag will trigger off of. In fact, we had to I worked with Jess Dunce, the rules manager, to rewrite the rules so we could get this card to work. And he very thankfully, thank you, Jess, made this card end up working in Magic rules. So that's something that's happy we were able to do. More on Furkrog in a second, though. Let's see what else we got in here, just so you can run through it all. There's a spinner here, once again, just like the others with that Art of Furkrog. Let's take a look. If you play Baldur's Gate, you might have fought against Furkrog at some point or another. Here he is. Hangs out. He actually can take a human form, too, and trick people. Lord Jirdan. That's it. He adopts that form sometimes. Anyway, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can freeze frame, if that's even a thing. That's going to be our code word, by the way, today, I think. Freeze frame. So what I always do if you've never watched these openings before is I give a code word about halfway through for you to drop in the comments, work into your sentence naturally somehow. Because I'm always curious who is actually watching all this far in. So if you're this far in, go ahead and drop freeze frame somewhere in the comments down below. One fun thing about this deck, I talk about this a bunch here in this playing thing. Goat is very good about getting to be the second player who left standing, but it can die very easily in a one-on-one situation. So you want to be very careful about who you attack, kind of whittle everyone's life down, and then keep a card so when it's down to a one-on-one game, you've got a way to kind of blow up their stuff or reset the game. So Reigns of Power in this deck is crucial. Ways to balance all their stuff is crucial, which we'll get to in a little bit, but really important for playing this deck. Oh yeah, and then of course we get this collector booster sample pack. Let's see what we get this time around. I think it's more exciting than that monster manual, which I was pretty stoked about. We've got, ooh, extended art Ascend from Avernus. That's cool. The white card I know a lot of folks are excited by. And then this foil Sivirus Nightmare Speaker. So just a little taste once again. Little sample, little appetizer there. Learned about the word, here's something relevant to nobody. I learned about the word napetizer today. That's where you take a nap and then you wake up and you just decide to go to bed for the night. That is when you take an appetizer. Things you learn while watching Gavin open up cards. Let me tell you. You work napetizer into your vocabulary. Maybe that should be the code word, napetizer. If you want to slide napetizer into the comments, I won't be sad about it. It'll make me smile. Okay, here's Furkrog, and I'll get the thick version from back here somewhere too. This is a thick boy. So yeah, just really cool. Yeah, I'm excited to see all the kind of decks people build with this that are both blue-red goading decks, but also ones that play, all kinds of a melange of red must-attack creatures. And it'll be very fun to see people play those, including cards like Chaos Dragon, some old D&D cards, which you'll see in here too. We looked a lot at the goad trigger. Originally, it was when Furkrog attacked, so it was just about goading. But I wanted to open it up a little bit. I always like it when Legends have a bit more play, a bit more versatility. And I thought it'd be cool to open up to your dragons. So this works in a dragon deck, but notably you don't get to goad one creature for each dragon. It's for each opponent you attack, it can goad one of their creatures. So if you have 3 dragons and you attack all 3 of your opponents, you can goad one of their creatures for each of them. But you're not going to attack one player with 3 dragons and goad 3 of their creatures. What we found with goad is a little bit of goad is very fun, and goading like one creature is pretty fun, but goading everything all the time, and it's funny I'm saying this given the next card I'm going to show you, I'll talk more about that in a second, but goading everything all the time can be kind of unfun, right? Because you're forced to attack with everything all the time, and you don't get a lot of agency in the game. So we toned down how much this goes to just max one per player, and that's only if you have a bunch of dragons that are attacking. So it's kind of the story there. Really happy with this guy. It's pretty fun. All right, there's Furkrog. Okay, now let's talk about a card which does go to all your opponent's stuff. Here's Baloth, Beardil, and Clan Crafter. So there was definitely an audience that did enjoy go to all your opponent's stuff. And this card was very contentious, Baloth, Beardil. We'll see how it ends up playing out. But my thought here was, it'll make you do a lot of work if you want to goad a lot of your opponent's stuff with Baloth. Now, it's still going to give you a lot of trouble when you get into the end game, because it will just make all their stuff attack you every turn, so it still has that problem. But I was like, we're going to cost it at 5 mana, give it no protection, and make it only goad 1 power creatures to start. So you have to really work at it to make this guy big enough to go to all their things. I know there is the green background in the main set raised by giants, I think, which makes him huge. So that'll be a combo some players will run. But 5 mana creature, goads all their stuff. If you remove it, it's not goaded anymore. And then you have to pay like 7 mana to recast it. This card, I think, is in one of those spaces where it's on the people who want to do it can do it, but it's kind of hard to make work. We'll see if history bears that out. I could be wrong. The other thing we found with this card, is that the moment it's removed, that stuff's not goaded anymore. So your opponent Doomblades this, and suddenly it's open season on you, and everyone's like, "Oh, we got to kill the Baloth player while we can." So playing this card is liable to get you killed. Just so you know. And it's paired with this Clan Crafter that turns your artifacts into +1/+1 counters and card drawing. A little sideways for this deck. This deck actually has a subtle artifact sub theme. It's pretty nestled in here. You don't see it super heavily, but there's enough artifacts here that can close down the game. And this deck did have trouble closing the game. Once again, one-on-one situations is you got to find a way to win the game. So there's some of those that will do that here, and you'll see what they are when we get there. I also thought that it'd be fun to have this card because this once again is a find in this pairing, find in this deck. But if you have an artifact-heavy deck, well, this is a great one for you. So it's a card which is fine in the precon, but you might take out and go put somewhere else. So I'm always up for cards that let you, once again, have interchangeability. Go to something else. Okay, let's take a look at some of these cards. We've got, of course, these Impetuses. We've got Signet, got some mana rampy stuff here. Lots of ways to get mana. This deck is mana hungry. You want to be casting dragons, because there are more dragons in this deck. Got some card draw. Curses were a great fit for this deck, right? You're telling people to attack each other. Also telling people to not attack you with this propaganda. Happy to get this reprint here, Curse of Opulence. Thing I'm not happy about, this is just like the most minor of minor complaints, is this gold token. This means every time we want to use Curse of Opulence, we've got to print the gold token alongside the treasure token, which looks really silly. But we did use gold before we used treasure. The difference is they don't tap, because we changed it because it was going to be in the same standard format as Improvise, and it let you double tap your stuff. You could tap it for improvising and sack it for the mana. That's why we changed the treasure in Ixalan. So now we're stuck with a couple gold cards forever. This is a cute card. A tiny dragon actually played really well in this deck. There's a lot of non-creatures, so cool little reprint to have. Goad your opponent's stuff. Bam! With his Bloodthirsty Blade. Lots of mana ramp. Like I said, it's a mana-hungry deck. Bunch of lands. Terrain Generator, by the way. A card you don't see that often that I put here because you're just 2 colors, and once again, the mana ramp is important. So sometimes you'll just have... And you also get a lot of cards in your hand with Furkrog sometimes. So just having this around to activate is pretty nice. Okay, really happy with Artificer class. It's a card I'm a big fan of. Also goes in with that artifact theme I was telling you about of copying some of your artifacts. As you saw, we passed by a ton of mana rocks in here, so this is actually quite strong with powering out those mana rocks faster. When we were working on Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, we included a bunch of classes, but we did not include Artificer class, which is an expansion class for D&D, I believe. There were a lot of folks who asked for it, and I think it was Jules Robbins who led that set. Well, I know it was him who led that set, but I think he was the one that came to me and said, hey, we're not doing classes in the main set of Baldur's Gate, and I didn't do Artificer class in my set, but it seems like the Commander decks is a great place for this. And I ended up putting it in this deck because of the artifacts theme that I was mentioning about. And in fact, I included a bit more artifacty stuff because of Artificer class. This card's great, though. I think it's a home run. And once again, in this deck, that level 3 mode up for 6 lets you close down the game when you're in one-on-one, making an army of artifact creatures if you have the right artifact. So we might see some of those later. This is a card I think designed by Noah Milrod. Noah, by the way, is a person who designed this deck or was the lead designer for this deck. Or I don't know, however you want to describe it. I was the lead designer of the product. He worked on this deck the most, whatever. Noah did a lot of great work on this deck. This is a card of his, which is super fun because you copy 2 things and you're never, it plays differently every time. It's got a very emergent gameplay, which is what we call it. You look around the board and you might create 2 copies of a land. That's happened before. Someone is making 2 copies of a land. That's sweet. People have created it of mana rocks. People have created it of planeswalkers. All kinds of cool stuff. Which is pretty wacky. I know people have also identified that this goes infinite with Cursed Mirror, so if you want to play your Cursed Mirror combo with Astral Dragon, you can kill people off. This is a card that I thought was really simple and straightforward, and just a really clean design. It's always nice when you find a clean design that just plays well. Notably, you can only copy your opponent's creatures. A lot of folks miss that, but it makes sense flavor-wise. You're making a doppelganger of them. So flash this in, copy their thing, goat it. This cat right here makes me smile every time. Look at that little goofy cat. He's so sad about whatever this Quasit is pouring in. Quasit is this weird D&D demon I learned about. You can Google it, for more information. Anyway, having some cards that keyed into your goaded creatures was going to be important for this goad deck. And the thing that often happens is you goad someone's creature, you're excited for them to attack with it, but then they just chump block on another player's turn and never gets to attack. What's up with that? Well, Bothersome Quasit helps make stuff not be able to block while it's goaded. So that way they can that you don't have that problem, which is nice. And then also there's a lot of non-creature spells in this deck. Notably, non-creature includes artifact once again. So you can goad people's stuff with this Bothersome Quasit. Death Kiss. This is by the way, Death Kiss, it sounds like it's a spell. It is a kind of beholder, believe it or not. So that's kind of cool. We may come up with this card pretty early of this first line of text. Just whenever an opponent attacks one of your opponents, it doubles its power. It's a big incentive to attack one of your opponents. And then I was going down words that I thought would be a good fit for D&D, a D&D set, and the monsters around. And I think someone maybe left a comment at some point that was like, there aren't enough D&D feeling monsters in this set. What gives? And I was like, oh, I see. I'll make this a big D&D monster, and I'll give it monstrosity. And it really like gets that feel of D&D well. It's like, yep, there's this huge beholder. At some point, it goes monstrous and snags a bunch of stuff in its wake. I tried a lot of different numbers on this monstrous. It was just static for a long time of like go to all creature target player controls or go to creature from each opponent. But actually, I switched it over to X, and people love having big dreams. We often talk about how you can make a card more appealing, and even if it's weaker, by just putting an X on it. And this card, would probably be stronger as like 5 mana, go 3 creatures, 3 counters. But the X gives you such a big dream and a great way to sink your mana into things. Here's the initiative card for red, which gives you some treasure. I think the story here is kind of cool, right? Gives you some treasure and creates the initiative, and then you attack people and you get more treasure. But then when you complete a dungeon, you make a 5/5 dragon because you made too much noise. Kind of a funny story. Notably, it's whenever you complete any dungeon, not just the initiative dungeon. So you can put this in your adventure deck from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms and complete those dungeons to make 5/5 dragons. So keep that in mind too. This is one of my favorite cards in the whole product. It's got a very high game end rate, but it's never clear who it's going to end the game for. Because you cast this, it goads everyone's stuff, sure. They fight each other for a turn. It gives them all double strike counters. Provided you overload it, which, let's be real, that's the one way you're going to play this card. You might cast it, every now and then for its base mode on, your commander or something. But really, it's sweet to overload. You overload it, and then they all attack each other. It's great. They dealt each other a bunch of damage. Maybe someone dies. And then it's like, it gets back to your turn. It's like, oh, crap. They all still have double strike. Uh-oh. It's a very red feeling card, right? Because you're like, oh, yeah, it's great right now. I'll deal with the double strike problem next turn, and maybe you can figure it out. So that's kind of what's going on with this. Notably, some people might be thinking, okay, you just cast it post-combat, so your stuff gets goaded but doesn't have to attack. True. Yeah, you could do that. That's how you'll play this card some of the time. But in this deck, having to attack is actually a bonus sometimes with Furkrog, right? Because it draws you cards and gets bigger when your stuff that has to attack hits your opponent. And double strike is even better with that. So sometimes you'll actually want to goad all your own creatures on before you attack and then get the bonus off Furkrog. Speaking, I mentioned earlier of one-on-one situation cards. This is a great one to hold for when you get down to one-on-one because you bounce all their stuff and then can go to town and finish them off. Lots of fun must-attack stuff here. So once again, this will trigger your Furkrog. It forces your opponent's stuff to attack even though it doesn't exactly say goat. So it's a really cool fusion of blue and red stuff here. Don't attack me. This is a card, by the way, Domineering Will. We put it in an old commander deck. I literally did not know it existed. I know a lot of Magic cards. I did not know this card existed. But Noah put it in here, and it played really well. Here's a cool dragon reprint we got to get in here. Kega, Midnight Clock, Pursued Whale. Fun little must-attack card. This, I think, is the card that is the most game-winningest in this deck. The number of times, if you buy this deck seriously, here's what you want to do. You want to goad people around, have them fight each other a bit, hold Reigns of Power in your hand, and then eventually it'll get down to one-on-one, you will cast this and you will win the game. This card has, I think, won the game single-handedly more than almost any other card in the deck because whoever is the last other person standing presumably has a ton of creatures. They blow your stuff up, they feel really confident. You cast Reigns of Power, the game is over. So huge key card for this deck. Huge. I was really happy at Rowan and Will in here. He's hanging out here somewhere. Let me just go find him. Where are you, Rowan? There we are. This Battle Bond duo fit in really nice here. I designed these the first time around, back in Battle Bond. Kind of hard cards to reprint, because they're partners. They don't really go in booster packs well unless you're doing the partner gag. You have to have a blue-red deck. And Rowan makes all their stuff attack, so it was actually a really good fit. And two reprints that are hard to get out there that I was able to slide into here that made a lot of sense. Lots of goading stuff here, must-attack stuff. Board sweepers. This is a great card, by the way, Brash Taunter. You want to attack me? Well, how about you don't? Because you'll take a bunch of damage if you do. Then I can fight their stuff. A lot of fun with those. Here's a card from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms that has to attack. It's even a dragon, so this is a perfect fit for this deck. This was a card that I was like, we have to reprint this here, Disrupt Decorum. Glad we got it in. Geode Rager. Yeah, this is always a delightful card. Goblin Spy Master. Gives everyone just tokens that are spies, make them have to attack. Makes me smile. Right, you say another dragon. Here's a card that showed up in Commander 2017. Kind of close to Chaos Dragon, but a big dragon that has to attack once again. Great with Furkrog around. Don't sleep on the fact that, There's all this stuff that makes your opponents have to attack. It's a really unique way to play this deck. Nimizit, Wizard, it'll survive the Dragon Party Wrath. We learned that in playtesting many times. Dragon's Horde, Psalms of Lacrum. This is the one that you often copy with the Artificer class to close out the game. I've seen that happen a bunch of times. This one too. Copy this with the Artificer class a bunch of times, and you'll close out the game in short order. Bunch of lands. Got Care Keep. We got some good blockers here. Care Keep, Wandering Fumarole is a creature land. Here's all the basics. We get on to the tokens. Once again, we got this initiative tracker. We got pirates. This is the Moby Dick pirate from the Pursued Whale. So it gives all your opponents this thing that makes them have to attack. We got cute little boars for Curse of the Swine. So that's a little cutie pie right there. Kobolds of Care Keep for your Care Keep, of course. Here's that tricky little gold token I mentioned before that we have to include. Rowan and Will's emblems. So that's kind of a cool thing to get here. You get these copy tokens. You get this dragon for the loot dispute. Treasure, another half of that. Kazul's Ogres, and then the Goblin Spy Master Goblins. Once again, one for each of your opponents. A nice little three goblins there. All right, and that is this blue-red deck. That leaves just one more deck left to go. It's time for Exit from Exile. This deck was helmed by Daniel Holt, who you might remember being on the show as a huge Kamigawa fan, but does more than just talk about Kamigawa. He was on the team and did a great job. It's red-green, cast stuff from Exile, or play lands from Exile as well in the case of Faldorn. We did this originally to tie into adventures, but we found that there was a lot more stuff to do if we expanded it from just calling out adventures, which the main set already had cards it cared about anyway, to caring about anything that you're casting from Exile. So it let us bring back a bunch of really fun old mechanics. You'll see here some of them. Oh, I was grabbed the wrong side here. You'll see here some of them. And it was fun to go back and find Rebound and Cascade and all kinds of stuff. Foretell, all kinds of stuff like that. And we redo it all. So a really unique theme. Of course, it has shades of Prosper from last year, but in red-green, it feels a lot different, especially with the land play that Faldorn triggers off of. So here's in that life wheel with that art for Faldorn. You kind of get how these life wheels probably work by now. Here's the insert. Take a look at this guy right here. Here's some tips on playing Exit from Exile, once again, which I helped write, talk about all the different mechanics you want to use, and notably, as it mentions here, Red's ability to exile cards from the top of its library and play them until end of turn, which will trigger all your exile stuff too. And that is very prospery. Here's a bit about Faldorn, out in the wilderness, Shadow Druid, all kinds of cool stuff. Freeze frame it. That's the magic word. Freeze frame it and learn about it. Let's get into this Collector Booster sample pack. This I'm excited about. Last Collector Booster sample pack. What are we going to get? We get... Ooh, nice. How appropriate for the Commander decks. An extended art folk hero. So that's pretty cool. That'll go... just go slot that right in over the other one that I have over there. In the my white-black party deck I'm certainly going to build. I got to build a white-black party deck now. I feel like after I made that deck, I should have one. And then here's Kadira, green-white legend in that rulebook frame. Very cool. Nice little sample pack there. Happy about that folk hero. I think that card is going to be a big player, basically in creature type matters decks for a while. Because even if it's, remember, you just put backgrounds in your deck in the 99. You don't have to put them as your commander. So in any white creature type matters deck, I think it's going to be a really great fit. Wow, what's going on here? Why is it just missing the ridge? Normally here it is. Oh, you're just gonna watch me struggle. Do you have any more word fun facts I can share with you? I got about the nap one last time. While you watch me struggle to open this, I'm so embarrassed. All right. Take a look at Faldorn here. Sorry, everyone expecting pristine opening videos where I can crack the packs every time. There are other people you can watch for that. Here, you're gonna get packs open badly and stories about magic design. Hopefully, one makes up for the other. Okay, here's Faldorn. 3 mana, 3/3. Whenever you cast a spell or play a land from Exile, or rather a land enters the battlefield under your control from Exile, I made that very specifically because there are some cards that do not play but put into play from Exile. You get a 2/2 Wolf. You can pay 1, tap, discard a card, exile top card of your library. You can play it this turn. A couple of fun stories I'll share about this card. One, I added the land thing in relatively late. One, it made a lot of flavor sense. Faldorn is hanging out, as a druid hanging out, so playing lands made sense for them. But also, it just gave the card something that felt very uniquely green about it. Was playing lands from Exile. A few cards key into that. One thing that's actually extremely relevant is this tap ability, because if you goad Faldorn, say the blue-red deck goads Faldorn, you can make sure it doesn't attack that turn by 1 tap, discard a card, activate that ability. So it's a great way to keep your Faldorn in play, so they can't goad it around. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, we actually came up with this design pretty quickly, and it's may moved around the numbers a little bit, but it stayed in place really well. And the deck theme kind of came together. Daniel Holt did a great job coming up with the initial build of this deck, and this face card stayed the same for a lot of it. Here's the backup commander. I think this was maybe the last card I modified in the set, Durnan. Originally, Durnan was going to have a different ability. He was going to give all of your cards in your hand adventure, which felt very appropriate for him. But due to a number of rules headaches that would cause, I ended up changing it. And I actually knew that way in advance, but I just kept changing it all the way up to the end because I kept tinkering, could not find a version that I liked until I eventually stumbled on this, where he gives you Undaunted. So Durnan's deal, he's a retired adventurer, he's a very powerful adventurer that now runs a tavern. So he's a barkeep now. And my idea here was, what does he do? He goes and recruits adventurers. So when he attacks, he looks for an adventurer. You look at your top 4 cards, you get to exile a creature, and then it gains Undaunted, because after he's talked with them, they're so inspired that they go out on their quest, and they are Undaunted now. I also find it charming to bring back old keywords, and Undaunted is one. I was like, what's a cost reduction keyword I could use? And Undaunted was a fun one to use there. Passionate Archaeologist is what it pairs with, which, hey, it wants you to play high mana cost cards from Exile, which Durnan's going to help you do, right? I mean, it gives this thing you exile a discount of 3 in a 4-player commander game. So that's huge, by the way. This is a card, like, no one's talking about this, but it's like, whenever it attacks, you basically draw a card, and it costs you 3 mana less to cast. It's pretty powerful. So I'm excited to see what people do with Durnan. And then, yeah, this Archaeologist. This is a card that I think has a lot of potential to be quite strong, even, once again, just in people's 99s. I know Prosper, of course. What card doesn't go into Prosper these days, but I don't want to pick this card up. It's pretty powerful. Deal a lot of damage. It does hit target opponents, so you can't fry everyone at the same time, but you can still take them down in short order there. Some reprints here. We got Nature's Lore, Arcane Signet. Happy to get this reprint in here, by the way. Nature's Lore is awesome. There's a red-green dual land, the Snow land, I think, in this deck too that you can Nature's Lore for. It's fun finding old adventures to put in here, right? From Eldraine. I guess they're not that old. They're from Eldraine, but yeah, there's a few of those in here. Ember's Shieldbreaker. Finding Foretell cards. Once again, all kinds of old mechanics. Foretell. Spectacle. This is an old mechanic. Doesn't actually do the Foretell thing or the Cast from Exile thing, but its main ability, of course, does. So it's really good to get some card advantage here. Cascade. You might not realize this. A lot of folks probably don't, but Cascade exiles the card before you cast it. So it does trigger your Cast from Exile stuff. So this is a nice card for that deck. For this deck, rather. Another adventure, great finisher, removal. Of course, you got your array of ramp. You got Kodama's Reach, Cultivate, Explore. Yeah. Ramp up. This is a card I like a lot. I think it's underplayed. Cascade. So you get to cast from Exile and kill something. Scourge Tribe Elder, of course. Search for Tomorrow. This card is heat in this deck. It's awesome because it gets you a land and helps you trigger your stuff. In fact, sometimes you'll actually want to suspend this on turn 2 instead of turn 1. So you can play Faldorn on turn 3, and then this will go off on the next turn. So keep that little tip in mind. Turn 2 suspend Search for Tomorrow, not turn 1 sometimes. Once again, Terramorph, Cast from Exile 3 visits, another great reprint to have here. Bloodbraid Elf, of course. This card, you might not expect Grumgully to show up. Secret commander Grumgully. No, don't actually put it as your commander in this deck. But it is really good with all the wolves that you make, right? So this makes Faldorn start creating 3/3 wolves instead, which is quite nice. Soul Ring, of course, you're going to have Soul Ring here. Lots of mana. There's that forest mountain snow land for you to search up. Let's go to the new card. So Delayed Blast Fireball. This is a name we tried making work a card for in the first D&D set. Didn't end up printing it, and it was, well, delayed, I guess. We finally put it here, which was really nice. And we, believe it or not, actually, this might surprise you, but this did not start as a top-down design. It did not start as Delayed Blast Fireball. It started as just, this deck wanted a sweeper that didn't kill its own stuff because it makes a bunch of wolf tokens. And so someone, Ken Nagel maybe, had the idea for just a sweeper that leveled up if you foretold it. And so we made this, and then Creative was like, oh, that's a perfect Delayed Blast Fireball. And they put that name on it, and it fit perfectly. We ended up changing the numbers around a bunch here. Originally, the Foretell, I think might have had an X in it somewhere to get that fireball feeling in, but we found it was just too much to expel this. It could deal too much damage. So we shifted it to be still reminiscent of Fireball, in that, it's 3 mana for 2 damage. So that's, if Fireball is XR, right? That's 3 mana for 2 damage. And same on the Foretell, it's 6 mana for 5 damage. So 5R would be 5 damage. We did move to 2 pips though, because there was concern about this being just too good of a sweeper and too splashable if it was 2 red and 5 red on the Foretell. So I moved it to double pipped. But one more thing on this card that's very strong that you might not have noticed: instant. Not often you see board sweepers that are instants. So this is very strong as a board sweeper. I expect this to see play not just in this deck, but plenty of other places. Nalfashni. Yeah, this is a fun idea that we came up with, of just you get to double your spell, whatever it is. So no matter what the spell is, it gets doubled, and it does it in a very red way because it gains haste and dies at the end of the turn if it's a creature. So this deck just wanted some big hitters and some flyers. Red, green, a little short on flyers. And in this biodome, there's all these flying dragons. So having a big flyer that could contend with those dragons or block is really important. The 6 toughness actually comes from that because of all the 5/5 dragons out there. So you can safely block, at least, a little bit of risk, but mostly safely block a 5/5 dragon with this. Green Slime. I love this card. The number of times we screamed, "You've activated my trap card," and flipped this over was too high. Really, really sweet design. It does a very green thing, which is destroy an artifact and hate on Artifice, but in a way that's green doesn't do a lot, right? It doesn't counter a lot of activated or triggered abilities, but this is a cool card that really feels like a Green Slime too. If you don't know them, they hang out in the top of dungeons and drop on top of you and make you lose your equipment. So felt like a great one here. And the Foretell, having this around later for just 1 green when you need it. I mean, it counters all manners of it blows up all kinds of enchantments. It blows up all artifacts that have active abilities, which is tons of them, like Lightning Greaves, right? It can't target mana abilities, so don't try and stop a Soul Ring, but any equipment it can blow up. A lot of versatility here. So, really nice card. Journey to the Lost City. I spent a long time iterating on this card. So there's this place called Mesro. It's the Lost City of Mesro. And I thought it'd be cool to have a card that really felt flavorful, like you're going and exploring. And I wanted to get a couple dice rolling cards in here somewhere. So I made this and tried a lot of different versions of it, with the idea of you're slowly trekking all through your D&D campaign to try and find this lost city. And then eventually on 20, if you are so fortunate to hit it, you get everything that you found. You get all the treasure that's hidden in the lost city. Every turn you're walking around, what am I going to find now? Sometimes you find a cool new land. You're like, oh, this is a cool location. Sometimes a monster attacks you, and then eventually maybe you find that lost city. And rolling a 20 on this feels awesome. I love cards where rolling 20 feels like a huge upgrade. We don't do them a lot in one-on-one sets. So like the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, we didn't do a ton of that because it's kind of brutal when you did. But here it's a huge upgrade, and it feels like you're really completing your quest, which is nice. Notably too, once again, playing lands that are exiled this way, or putting them into play that are exiled this way, does trigger Faldorn. So this is a place where that really matters. Tlinkali Hunter, it's a huge scout. We wanted to make a new adventure. It just made a lot of sense, and lets you exile stuff, exile a creature, and then you can cast it next turn, which is kind of cool. This line I really like. I think this was another Glenn Jones suggestion of letting you pay 0 for casting creature from exile, which of course works with this ability, but also all kinds of other stuff, like red bottling effects that exile a card and let you play it this turn. Kind of a cool little thing. This is a card that I love. It just was so simple, came together. I think that we designed this card really early, and it just basically never changed. It is the green entry in the suspend suspend cycle. It started with Rousing Refrain, for example. And the other refrain, Inspiring Refrain. I've always loved the resuspend cards from Future Sight, so this is a ode to those in a sense. This is actually quite good with Faldorn because not only you exile cards until you hit a land, and the land comes into play, so that'll trigger Faldorn. But then if you're casting this off Suspend, it's also going to trigger Faldorn. So this card off Suspend will actually trigger Faldorn twice. So it makes a ton of wolves. Suspend this on turn 2. It's actually perfect, right? Suspend this on turn 2, play Faldorn on turn 3, and then on turn 5, you will get two wolves. And then, every 3 turns, it'll come back and do it again. I really enjoy cards. Why does this not search your library? Well, one, I kind of enjoy this can get any land, but you're never sure what it's going to get, so it's because it flips from the top. That's pretty cool. I also didn't want you searching your library right before you drew. Search for Tomorrow is always kind of a bummer because it comes off. You have to search your library, you got to shuffle, and then you draw again. Here you can just draw your next card and keep going. So yeah, that's kind of the story of Venture Forth. Other than that, just a pretty cool design. And I want to give a special shout out to Matt Tabak. The reason why is normally we would want suspend reminder text on this card. It's kind of a complicated mechanic, but the only way we could get suspended reminder text to fit is if you didn't put the cards on the bottom of your library in a random order and they just stayed exiled forever. I was worried it was going to be a hit to the appeal of the card to have them exiled forever, but not so much so that I wasn't willing to print it. And actually, up until almost the very end, it exiled those cards forever and had suspend reminder text. And at the very last minute, after we got some feedback on the slideshow, Matt Tabak just looked at me, sent me a message. He was like, "Hey, are people going to find this card cooler without the reminder text and if they go on the bottom of your library?" And he was like, I was like, "Yeah, they are." And he's like, "All right, we'll make the change." And so big shout out to Matt, I think, for pulling the trigger on that. I think it was Matt. Michael was my main editor on the set, but Matt did some work as well. I think it was Matt that talked to me about that. If I misquoted you, Michael, I apologize. But they're both baller editors to have around here. Servox Tome, this is the initiative card for this deck. I thought it'd be cool to have a colorless card that you would want to play to get the initiative into play because the initiative is really fun, so incentivizing that is a thing I'm happy to do. And this is, gives you mana, and then really powerful effect once you've completed a dungeon. Once again, a thing that you might play in your just venture deck. You have Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. You don't just have to do the initiative, but once you have completed a dungeon, you pay 3 mana to cast a free spell every turn, so that's pretty darn powerful. Then we're into the other reprints here. We got Roar Phoenix, a Cascade card which cares about cascading. Makes sense. A good old Bony G. Probably played against this guy in Adventures or in Eldraine standard. Dream Pillager. Blue-red deck's not the only deck with dragons. This guy exile stuff and cast a bunch of spells. Tali. One of my favorites, Greater Gargadon. I love this card. Big closer. Connect the Future. Yeah. This is a huge reprint, right? I mean, people have been so happy about this. I'm really glad we put it in here. It's such a natural card for this deck. Gives you a ton of mana. Lets you cast 3 cards. I don't need to explain why Justice Will is good. You know why it's good. You see it in Commander games all the time. Just so happy it's here. And I'm glad the audience has reacted well to that. Mizium Mortars, doing a bunch of damage. Yeah. This is a card from Battle Bond that I always loved. And I think Daniel suggested this as a reprint here. And it was a really cool one to get. That lets you cast stuff that you've exiled. So you're casting it from exile, but it's your opponent's stuff. It's a red card that lets you play your opponent's stuff. Fun, so much fun there. This deck does have some big enchantments. You can just close out with Warstorm Surge and Primal Bounty, I think, is in here too. So that's pretty nice. Reprint that fit in perfectly from the Prosper deck. So nice to have that here. This card looks kind of random, but was just a really good way to help make sure you built up an army and didn't die till you got your exile cast synergies rolling. So Arasta did some good work. Also, with once again all the dragons around, having reach and a bunch of reachers was really important in the Biodome experience. We call the Biodome, by the way, if you're not familiar with what that means. Biodome is the environment of all 4 decks playing against each other. Here's Hornet Queen. I think this might be the first time, maybe it's already been done, but might be the first time with this Amonkhet remastered art printed in paper. So that's kind of cool. Get that art out there. I think this is the first time because I believe I suggested this. I was like, oh, we have this new art for Amonkhet remastered on Arena. Let's get this into paper. So I'm always looking for places to do that. So if there's a piece you'd like to see printed that is Arena only or Magic Online only, let me know in the comments down below. Maybe I'll try and get it into a set sometime. Sometimes you just gotta tell me it exists because sometimes I just don't even know. We have so many art and promo cards online. I'll take a look every now and then, but this card's fun. Again, once again, you can cast from your opponent's stuff every turn. Get those triggers. Here's a bunch of stuff. Another forest, by the way, mountain forest you can find with your Nature's Lore style stuff. Endgame with this Keswick Wolf Run. Raging Ravine, Spine Rock Knoll. Yep, all the stuff you expect. And then, bam. Here's our tokens. We got a lot of wolves. Oh, so many wolves for Faldorn. We got those 1/2 spiders for Arasta. We got 2/2 satyrs for Xenagos. Get a little planeswalker in here. We got this Phyrexian Beast token. 4/4 Phyrexian Beast. So that's kind of cool. A couple of those guys. And we got some sandworms. We got beasts for like Beast Within. and a Primeval Bounty. These are for, in case you don't know about it, these are for Azuri's Predation. That's what those are. Got this human, the 1/1 white human for the Lovestruck Beast, so cute. And then our 4 insects for Hornet Queen. And there you have it. That is all 4 of the decks. I hope you enjoyed all the stories. This ended up being a monster of a video, but I'm so happy to be able to present this all to you. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought, if you enjoyed the stories. And I'm curious which one you want to buy. So post about that down below and which one is your favorite. And otherwise, I just appreciate you so much watching. These decks mean a lot to me, and it was really cool to run through them all with all of you. So really happy to have these finally here and can't wait to go build them for myself with all kinds of different versions of them. I'll talk with you again soon. And in the meantime, I hope you have a lot of fun enjoying the Commander Legends Commander decks. You got this.